Hello, my name's Andy. Welcome to episode 10 of Keeping Water. In this episode I'll be taking a closer look at the fish, checking them for any health issues and measuring their growth. There'll also be the usual weekly update. Although the underwater filming can tell you a lot about the fish, sometimes it can't tell you everything, as it can be difficult to tell via the GoPro or through the surface of the water exactly what every blemish or mark on a fish is. Therefore yearly, or when there's a particular problem, I net the fish to get a better look. Whilst the mass of marginal plants around the pond are great at lowering the risk from herons, it's unsurprisingly less helpful when trying to net the fish. Consequently, it's a challenging process, balancing the aims of catching them with not causing them too much undue stress. I don't have a proper blue koi inspection bowl, so I use a 4-foot by 2-foot plastic pond, which you may have seen before in various guises in previous episodes. It was also a wildlife pond at one point. Anyway, after cleaning it, I dried a small area and attached the adhesive tape. That done, I could fill the tub with water, which I obviously pumped in straight from the pond. I tried to position some padded mats on the end of the pond to help against the fish panicking and hurting themselves, but I hadn't really thought this out properly and it didn't go too well. Better luck next time. So, there are two main goals. Firstly, to monitor health, secondly to check growth. However, with the rudd, this second goal is quite tricky. I don't net all 14, so I can't really compare size accurately. Last year they varied between 10.6 to 15.2 centimetres, about 4 to 6 inches. The one I measured this year was 14 centimetres, 5.5 inches, which doesn't really tell me too much. All the rudd I netted, however, looked healthy, so no problems there. Next, the small female tench, who also looked very healthy. She was the easiest fish to catch from the pond, but a little reluctant to let me catch her by hand once in the small pond, so I used the skimmer net I was removing detritus with to catch her, before then holding her by hand for measuring. She has grown well over the last 12 months. Last year she was 25.4 centimetres, about 10 inches, and this year she is 30 centimetres, 11.8 inches, which is an 18.1% growth. Considering the tench have to fight each other and the carp for food, that's a good result. And now on to the male tench. Again, no obvious problems with its health. He was far harder to catch with the net in the pond, but less bothered about being handled well in the smaller one. Size-wise, it's had the biggest percentage growth of any of the fish in the pond, and had nearly caught up with the small female one. It is now 29 centimetres, 11.4 inches, up 20.2% from last year's 24 centimetres, or 9.5 inches. So, more good growth. The larger female tench next, another healthy looking fish and with some good growth. I'd guessed it was about 18 inches and wasn't far off, as it turned out to be 45 centimetres or 17.7 inches. Last year it was 40.6 centimetres, around 16 inches, so that's a 10.7% increase. The smallest growth rate of all the tench, but understandable as the oldest and largest fish. Once a mirror carp, the most obviously greedy fish in the pond. I had been a little concerned about some marks on its head, but these were quite benign on closer inspection. The carp was less than impressed with being caught, but settled down and was quite cooperative when moved and lifted by hand. Last year it was 58.4 centimetres, about 23 inch. This year it turned out to be 63 centimetres, just under 25 inches, a 7.95% increase. Again close, though slightly more than I'd guessed. The fish looked healthy, no missing scales and some rich colours. Finally, the common carp. This fish was the hardest one to net. In fact, this video was filmed the day after the other fish, as I had to give up on day one to avoid stressing them too much. Again, once in the smaller pond, it was quite easy to handle and position. When I bought them in 2018, and again last year, the common was a little larger than the mirror. However, if you've watched episode 6, Feeding, you'll know that I observed that the common appeared to eat less than the mirror did, a fact that appears to be supported by their respective growth rates, as the mirror is now the biggest carp. The common was 61 centimetres, 24 inches last year, and is now 62 centimetres, 24.5 inches, only a 1.8% growth, compared to the mirror's near 8% increase. I couldn't and haven't been able to see anything to worry about health-wise, so aside with issues with confidence when feeding, I'm not sure why its appetite and growth has slowed. One thing I did remember to check with the common that I forgot with the mirror was to look at the vent to see if this would give any clues to its sex. As you'll see, there's clearly a cross formed by two lines, which according to the research I've done means that she's female. As I said, I forgot to check the mirror, but based on the similarity of their shape, I guess it was female too. I'll check next year, unless they spawn, in which case there'll be no need. So, what did I learn from all of that? Well, a few things. Firstly, although I can't be sure about their growth rate, the rudd haven't seemed to grow as much as I'd expected. I think this clearly relates to my less than focused feeding regime for them. I need to do better. Time to move on from benign neglect, I think. Secondly, the common carp has grown far less than I expected, although this maybe is not so unexpected considering its apparent appetite. However, I need to consider a number of things. In the feeding episode, I talked about how I was attempting to get the fish to feed more confidently from the surface when I was by the pond, even though they preferred and were more relaxed to feed from the bottom or from the surface when I wasn't around. Maybe this is more for me than them though, and I should reconsider, especially if it has impacted on how much the common feeds. I'm considering therefore feeding more sinking pellets, and will also explore other food options. I also need to consider this may just be the individual growth of the fish. Not all fish grow quickly or grow huge, and 60 centimetres is not small by any means. Additionally, I don't measure weight or depth, and length may not be the complete picture. I've also learnt that the fish are healthy. They have no obvious signs of ill health, which is great, although I'm not going to be complacent. Just when you think you've got it sorted out, something tends to go wrong, so best to be vigilant. Aside from netting the fish, not a lot going on around the pond this week. The algae hasn't reduced completely, but has responded well enough to the treatment, and I've no plans to treat again for the time being, especially as I've not bought any more. Netting the fish caused a bit of a mess to the plants, and definitely answered any questions I had about whether there was any dead or dying plant matter beneath the green stuff, because quite a lot of it is now either on the bottom of the pond or netted out and on the field behind my house. The plants are finally starting to turn brown in some numbers, so some in-pond gardening is definitely in my near future. Whilst in there I'll clean the pump, as it's also collected quite a lot of the plant matter. Its flow rate slowed dramatically after netting the fish, but I managed some rough cleaning with this engineering marvel I created. Heath Robertson Award 2 weeks running then. The fish were definitely unsettled for a couple of days after, but fed pretty well on sinking pellets. Definitely not keen on coming up to the surface though. I've been thinking more about my additional filtration plans. If you've seen previous episodes, you'll know I have a vague idea to build a backy shower in the shed, fed by the skimmer pump. However, I'm not sure I'm going to get enough of a flow rate for it, and I can't afford a new pump. So, plan B is a little different. Instead, I'll have a large tub in the system after the multi-bay to use as a moving bed. The idea being to keep the K1 in the multi-bay, but use it as static media instead. I'd keep an air disc in the bay as it would make cleaning it easier. The static K1 would help somewhat with fines, but I'm not sure it will be enough. I'm going to experiment with filter floss in the skimmer basket, although I'll wait until after autumn as the leaves will be enough work for it. I'll hopefully have the new test kits, ammonia and nitrite, next week, which will be added to my data collection. So far the temperature data is just telling me what I already knew, that water gains and loses heat much slower than air. Which is definitely a good thing, on balance, as stable temps are better for fish than too many highs and lows. As I'm averaging just over 15 degrees, the only effect on the fish's feeding this week has been some bloke with a net. I'm toying with adding more plants to the pond. Making the retro series reminded me how much I liked having lilies in the pond. However, it's going to need some thought, as there's problems to overcome in protecting the fish from the baskets and protecting the plants from the fish. Equally, I don't want the look of baskets in the bottom of the pond. I have some ideas involving pond liner and some ways to soften the edges of the baskets. If, and it's a big if, I do it, they'd go in the near corner to the right of the skimmer. Anyway, that's enough rambling thoughts for this week's update. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode. I really do appreciate it. Please do the like, subscribe thing if you've enjoyed it. Next week's episode is somewhat undecided. It will either be the big in-pond gardening episode, or, more likely, an as yet utterly secret topic. Anyway, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.